One of the last things we'll do is to model some overgrowth, some vines here over the pillars and maybe these blocks. So yeah, we'll need a leaf for that and a particle system. This part is aimed for you to understand a little bit the particle systems and how you can use them to your advantage, not only when creating some powerful effects, but right here where you can procedurally model some objects. First, we'll need some leaf and select one of those with the left click. And right now I need you to duplicate it, but not as a link duplicate, but full duplicate. So either you right click and click duplicate objects or press Shift D. So let's press Shift D. Let's press enter. And now we'll need to clear the parent again, because this leaf is parented to this one here. So, or rather this one is parented to the trunk of the palm. So let's press Alt P, as you know already, and let's click clear parent. And it jumped away, but don't worry about that. Right now we will reset the position anyway, so leave it like this. And let's enter the local view, so press slash on the numpad. And if you look on the right, if you have this panel, extend it. If not, you can do that by pressing N. And here you can see the different position and rotation this object has assigned, and you can enter 0 values here if you want to reset the position, but there's a quicker way. For reset we use Alt, so whether it's a rotation, scale or position, you can use Alt R, Alt S or Alt G to reset those values. So right now I need you to reset the position, so let's press Alt G. You can see it all jumped to zeros, and we'll also reset the rotation. So let's press Alt R, and there are 0 degrees there. And we can locate the object by moving the camera, but you already know the shortcut to that is to press the period on the numpad. So let's press period, and we have a nice focus on our reset object. Now let's clear this up a little bit. So we need to remove the solidify modifier here. We could leave it there, but there would be too much geometry for a particle system to handle. And yeah, let's keep it simple. So click this little X here on the modifier to remove that. And let's go to the top view by pressing number 7 on the numpad. Let's zoom out a little bit with the wheel mouse and duplicate and rotate the leaf, so we have 3 of them, and we'll do that in edit mode. So let's tab into the edit mode, and right now let's click this and change the pivot point from median to 3D cursor. And it's because I want to scale the leaf on this axis on the Y, but I don't want to move this point here. And we could done that in object mode, but we will also need to duplicate and rotate in the edit mode. So why not to do both of those things at once? So let's press S to scale, then Y, and let's make this leaf a little bit smaller. And now just press Shift D and R to rotate and create a copy. Somewhere around here, confirm with the left mouse click, and let's do it again. So Shift D, then R for rotation, and rotate it right here. Okay, let's look at that. Looks nice so far, and there's one more thing, and that's this shape right here, and we want these leaves to be growing out of the wall, so this will go into the geometry of the wall, and I don't want that. So let's press 3 to see it from the side. And since we have this one selected already, we can adjust the rotation here. And since we have a cursor pivot point, we can just press the R right away and bring it up a little bit. Now we can deselect this. You can click away or press A consequently. And as you already know, you can select linked meshes by hovering over with the mouse and pressing L. So let's do that right here. Press R to rotate and bring it up a little bit. Don't worry about the precision here. We are creating a plant, so no need to worry about the precision. Let's deselect this and hover over this one, press L, press R and rotate it a little bit. Okay. And now the last thing we need to do is to prepare this for the particle system. And for some reason, when you instantiate the object with the particle system, normal of the particle aligns with the y-axis of the object. And there are two ways how you can solve this. You can do this right here in the edit mode when you're preparing the particle, or later in the particle settings you can check the option there that takes a rotation from the object. But then you would need to rotate the object anyway, so I think the better way right now is to rotate it right here and have it all prepared. So let's look from the side by pressing 3 on the numpad. Let's select all, press A, and then R. Let's hit X for the x-axis rotation and minus 90 degrees. Okay. Right now I want to scale this a little bit down because the palm tree was too large and we need those particles to be smaller. And this again is something you can do in the particle settings, but why not have it prepared a little bit better beforehand? So yeah, let's just press S and scale it down here. Doesn't have to be much, just a little bit. Now we can exit the local view by pressing the slash on the numpad again. Exit the edit mode with tab and move this into the main collection. So here you can see the yellow selection of this leaf. So let's move this to the main collection so it doesn't get lost in all these leaves. And to recognize it even better when we need to select it from the particle system settings, we can rename it, and let's name it leaf particle. We can now deselect this, just click away, and we need to create one other thing for particle system to work, and that's emitter. Particle systems work with two types of objects. One is a particle, and that's something that will be created in those huge numbers, and the other thing is emitter, and that's the geometry from which you can create these particles in various numbers, various directions, and all the stuff. But you need to have some emitter object, and this could be as basic as a cube or a sphere or even a plane or something like that. But right now I want to have a more complex geometry because I want to cover those stone structures. So we'll need to prepare some emitter. They'll be then covered with all those leaves. Now let's switch to the side view by pressing 3 on the numpad. Let's zoom in a little bit, and I want to create first vine here on this column, or rather this block of stone. So let's shift and right click here to move the cursor, and we'll create a plane here. So shift A, mesh, then click plane, and let's go into the edit mode, vertex select by pressing 1 or clicking here. And right now we have all vertices selected. We can make sure by pressing A again if we want. Right now we'll just merge them into the one vertex, so let's press Alt M for merge, and merge them at center. As you can remember, we used this technique when we modeled the dead tree in the episode before, where we started with the plane and then merged all those vertices into just one and created a whole other custom geometry. So we now have one new vertex, and press G to move it here in the corner. I hope you can see it well. And right now we can just extrude this and create new faces. But first of all, let me enable snap. So Shift Tab for snapping, or click here. And let's just check if the face is selected, and we can uncheck the rotation. We don't need that. So we need project individual elements. I'll press G again if for some reason it wasn't snapped properly to the surface. And right now with the snap enabled, if you do extrusion, it will always follow the surface of the object here. So if we press E and then drag somewhere here, you can see we are snapping this here. And I didn't see from here that this is beveled. It's really hard to see there. So let's go back and let's move this somewhere here. If you look from the wireframe mode, this is the bevel here. So now we can extrude by pressing E and dragging here. But there's even faster method. We can extrude single vertices, and that's by holding Control and right clicking with the mouse. And this is really simple and fun way how to make a new geometry. So you just hold Control and click with the right mouse button and create new vertices. And since we have a snap enabled, you can see we are copying the surface quite perfectly. So let's go back a few times, front view, and let's extrude here. So I'm holding Control and right clicking. And if we have 4 vertices, we can just select now with the Shift or drag a selection around them and press F to create a face. And here I want to select this vertex and move it a little bit here, so we can copy this bevel here. And right now, just extrude one more here. And here I want to leave it as a triangle, so select just these 3 and press F. And if you press period to focus the view on the selection, you can see we created the face that perfectly copies the surface. And later we'll use the particle system to cover that with leaves. So let's go back to the side view with 3. Now click this one here and extrude it right there. Click this one, extrude it here, and hold Shift, select them, make a new face. And right here there will be just another triangle, so press E and just Shift click this to select and press F to fill with the face. We can now modify the shape a little bit, so you can click some of these vertices and move them around to create like a more natural shape or something. That's totally up to you what you want to do here. Okay, something like this. Right. And now let's just move this plane that's highlighted with yellow. Let's just move it to this collection here and rename it to Vines. We can now tab out of the edit mode. Now we have both objects ready. We have a Vines object as an emitter and we have leaves as a particle. So now all the magic will come together and we'll create our first particle system. And it's located right here, this little tab here which says particles. So click that, and here in the list just click the plus icon to create a new particle settings. And since we want to be tidy, we can rename this to Vines. So let's rename the particle slot and particle settings as well, Vines. And there are two modes for the particle emitter, and those are emitter and hair. And the main difference is that the emitter creates particles over time, and the hair, as you can imagine, is designed for hair creation and creation of a lot of strands of hair and grass and fur and all that stuff. So it doesn't have to change over time, but emitter can be configured, and I like to use that one right now. So you know how the basic emitter is configured, so maybe you can use it later in animation or something like that. So yeah, let's configure the emitter. And here the first thing is number of particles that are emitted, and leave that as it is for right now. And the two important values are frame start and frame end. And down here you can see there is a timeline, and it should be there if you left your default window settings. So there is a timeline. If for some reason there isn't any timeline, you can always drag a new window here by dragging this corner and changing these to timelines. So now we have two of those, but worry not, we can click this corner and drag it down, and when it highlights like this, you release it and the window will disappear. So this is a nice way how you can modify your Blender viewports, but I don't want to go into that. I just wanted to show it to you just in case you for some reason or just accidentally remove the timeline from this default layout. And if you press play, you can see the playhead is going, and right away you can see there are some particles or representations of particles, and a certain number of particles are emitted over time, and there are some basic physics applied to them like the gravity, so they are all falling, and if you press pause they freeze in time. So this is the basic particle system, and it can be used to simulate many things from cluster of balls to fireflies, snow, rain, whatever you want. Basically everything that happens with large quantities of objects can be simulated with the particle settings. So let's go back to the 0, but right now we just want a certain amount of particles appearing here, and we don't want them to be animated in any way. So let's just set the frame start to 0. You can see there is a particle already visible because we are on the frame 0, and let's set end to 0 as well. And what will happen is all the particles that would appear over time are now emitted at once at the frame 0, and the emission stops at the frame 0. So if you would play the animation, they're only instantiated once and they fall away. If you want to disable that, not necessary here because we are not working with the animation, but if for some reason you would like to animate this scene later, you can always go to the physics and disable the Newtonian physics here to none, and right now they're just staying in place. And of course disappearing after time because they have a lifetime. And that's the third value here, where basically you set number of frames you want each particle to live. So since we have an animation of 250 frames, let's set it 250, but I'm just explaining this to you so you understand these basic values like the number of particles, emission start, emission end, and lifetime, and you know what that does over time, but we are not dealing with animation right now, so let's move on and let's use these particles to render some leaves. So right here in the render section you can see there's an option render as, and there is a value halo, and we want to change that to object, so change that. And right here there is a subsection object, and you can see there is instance object. with the empty value. So let's click there and you can select the leaf particle here. Since there's a long list, you can always search for that. So let's just write leaf, and immediately after you press P, there's only one object fitting the description, and that's a leaf particle. So let's click that. And if you move in, you can already see there are many leaves instantiated right here. So now we'll just play with the scale here. So under the object, you can see there is a scale value, and you can really make them bigger here. And this one underneath, the scale randomness, that one is really important because it adds that variation we need to have in nature. So you can adjust this from 0 to 1. So let's bring it up all the way to 1. So we have multiple sizes of these leaves. And one other thing to have the variation really come into life is the rotation option right here above the render. So let's click the rotation and expand this with this little arrow. And right now you can randomize the basic rotation, and you can again go all the way from 0 to 1. So let's go all the way to 1, and you can already see there is a bunch of rotation happening. And the second option is phase, which is just the rotation on the other axis. So basically it's this one along that y-axis that I've been talking about. So let's leave that to 0.5, but we want to randomize that too. So we have now a nice variation, and I really want to bring up the scale a little bit. So let's search for the scale right here underneath render and make those leaves bigger. Okay, and I think they are a little bit too much in the geometry of the stone here. So what we can do is go right here, select the leaf particle in the outline view, press slash to go into the local view, 3 to see it from the side, 3 on the numpad, and now go into the edit mode, select all, and grab it on the y-axis a little bit. Not too much, just a little bit. Let's tab out, and back from the local view we can deselect this. And what happened right now, the pivot point is a little bit further away from where the leaves actually start, so they're not going too much into the structure right now. And we can select this to modify the emitter a little bit. We can play with the number of the particles, and I think 1000 particles was way too much, but I left it in the beginning because only after you set the scale and rotations and all the stuff, you are able to see how much, or rather how many particles you need to have. So I think this looks something like 500. So let's bring it to 500, that'll be fine. We can deselect this, and voila, we have some nice vines, some nice overgrowth over the stone, just like that. Now we can create more of those, and it'll be basically the same, but there will be a slight difference. So let's just shift right click here to change the position of the cursor, and let's press shift A, but click here on this collection. So we are creating object in that collection instead of the palms. We can collapse this one, and let's press shift A, add mesh and plane, and again just tab in, press alt M to merge at center, and we can go to the front view, zoom in a little bit, and right now we can move this somewhere here. The snap is still enabled. If it isn't, just click here or press shift tab, and we can start creating some geometry to make some overgrowth. And I just want it to grow all over this pillar in the top, and then a little bit over the pillars as well. So yeah, let's go to the front view. You don't have to if you don't want. You can do it in the perspective view as well. So let's extrude. And let's create some geometry. You can shift select those, press F to fill the geometry. Let's press period to center the view, because the movement of the rotation of the camera rotation was really quirky. So let's select this one, extrude right here, and then again let's cover this. You can also press 2 to edge select this one and extrude the whole edge, and then maybe scale it on the Z so you can be maybe faster, but I think you have more control like this, and in the end it isn't so much quicker. So yeah, let's do it like this. Let's create one more here, maybe here, and we can close this as a whole face. And right now I just want to go downwards here and maybe here. Let's finish this up, and we can move some of those around, no problem with that. So okay, and let's extrude this one here. Shift click to select, fill. And now finish this one. Okay. Something like this. This doesn't have to be so far than this one, so we have a little bit of a variation there too. Okay, this is our second emitter, and let's call that Vines too. So double click in the outline view, and now I remember there's one thing I wanted to do here on the original emitter. So let's click here on this object, and right down here under the render settings there's one little checkbox that says show emitter. So I want you to turn that off. Don't worry if this disappears, that's just because the timeline restarted. So just press the play and rewind it again. And what this option does is actually determining whether when you render the scene, in the end the original object that emits these leaves will be visible. So we don't need that right here, and all the geometry that we created for the vines is basically just a dummy to determine where the leaves should be emitted. So that's why we uncheck this. And let's get back to this object right here. Let's press period to focus again. And as I told you before, there is one step that will be different here. And when you add the new particle settings here by pressing the plus in the particle list, you don't need to set all these values again, but you can click on this little arrow here where it says particle settings 001, and you can actually select from the existing data in the scene. And here you can see there is a vines particle settings that we defined on the first object, and if you click that, works like magic. Right away you can see there are leaves all over this object, and this is basically ready. And all the settings are exactly the same as on this emitter before. So right now only thing that remains is to add one more, and I wanted to have some vines here as well in the front of the scenes to fill that to fill a little bit of that empty space. So let's click here by holding shift and clicking with the right mouse button and move the cursor there. We can shift A to add a new plane, and this will be completely the same. So let's merge that at center. Let's look from the front. The snapping is active, and right now I will just create this geometry really quick so you can see how I place the object, and maybe you can have some of that creative inspiration from there. But again, if you have your own ideas how you want to do this, don't hesitate and do it however you like. Yeah, let me close this here because there is edge there. We can drag this down. Extrude this here. And I have this little idea that, let's press period, focus. We can maybe go behind the corner here. So if you press E and extrude here, you can see there's no problem with the snapping active. Okay, right now let's just modify these shapes a little bit. Okay, I think that's quite alright. So let's tab out, and again let's rename to vines, plus icon, and select the vines particle settings. So that's some vines for you and how the particle system work. And of course there is a lot more to the particles and the emitters and the hair settings and all that stuff, but I don't want you to overload you, so let's stay focused on these illustrations. Let's finish them, and then you can search for more information on the particles and more things that you want to do.